London never sleeps, but in a narrow alley near Soho, in a workshop that smells of machine oil and aged wood, it seems time stood still long ago. Elena is a young woman who understands the heart of machines better than the hearts of people. Under her hands, broken chronometers breathe once more. That evening, a storm was brewing. Elena was just closing up when the bell rang. A man entered the shop, his face hidden in the shadow of a hood. Without a word, he placed a pocket watch on the counter. It was heavy, crafted from a black metal that knew no rust, and its casing was engraved with stars that seemed to move in the moonlight. "Fix it," he whispered, vanishing into the rain before she could protest that she was closed. Elena opened the watch and held her breath. Inside were no gears she recognized. It was a labyrinth of crystals and fine silver filaments pulsating with a faint blue light. The clock was dead, but as soon as she touched it with her finest tweezers, the workshop trembled. Elena felt a strange tingling in her fingertips. One delicate movement, one click, and then it happened. The hands did not move forward. They began to spin frantically backward. In that instant, the sound of the city outside fell silent. The rain on the window pane froze mid-drop. People on the street stood still like statues. Elena was the only one moving. The watch in her palm grew warm, pointing northward. It led her out into a world where time had stopped. She walked through empty streets where neon signs glowed with an unmoving light. She reached an inconspicuous subway entrance in an alley she had never noticed before. Above the entrance, it wasn't a red circle flickering, but a silver zero. She descended. The platform was empty, the air smelling of ozone and ancient secrets. Then, a rumble echoed from the tunnel. It wasn't the sound of a modern train, but the mechanical thunder of a steam engine crossed with magic. A train emerged from the darkness, its windows glowing golden. The doors hissed open, and a man fell out. It wasn't the one who gave her the watch. This man wore a black coat, and a tattoo crawled across his neck, glowing like liquid silver. Behind the man, a shadow billowed from the carriage. It wasn't ordinary darkness. It was a living mass with 1,000 hungry eyes. The man, Julian, drew a short blade that looked as if it were forged from frozen lightning. He fought with incredible elegance, but it was clear he was exhausted. The shadow knocked him to his knees and prepared to strike. Elena, without thinking, raised the pocket watch. It began to glow so fiercely that the shadow recoiled with a roar back into the train. Julian looked up. His eyes were silvery and weary. "You fixed it?" He exhaled in disbelief. No mortal should have the power to move the heart of time. At that moment, the watch in Elena's hand stopped, and time jerked back into motion. But she already knew that her life in the workshop had just ended. The doors hissed shut, and the roar of London, as Elena knew, it vanished forever. She found herself in a space that defied the laws of physics. The interior of the Midnight Line train looked like the dream of a mad aristocrat mahogany paneling. Seats upholstered in deep purple velvet, and lamps where trapped lightning danced instead of light bulbs. Julian leaned against the wall with a weary sigh, the silver tattoo on his neck still pulsing faintly. "You're lucky, mortal," he said in a gravelly voice. "Most people who lay eyes on Station Zero never find their way back." Elena gripped the pocket watch tightly. She could feel the heart of time beating within it, stronger than ever before. "Where are we? What is this train?" Elena asked, staring out the window. Instead of the black walls of a tunnel, She saw streams of liquid light rushing past at an impossible speed. Julian looked at her for a long moment. This is Line 0, the artery of London that you won't find on any map. It exists for only 1 hour a day, between midnight and 1 a.m. We, the Guardians, ensure the void doesn't seep into your dreams. He explained that the city has a magical echo. Every second people waste, every forgotten memory, ends up here. The Guardians collect these crumbs of time to keep the world in balance. But the shadows that attack them want more. They want to stop time altogether. Julian stepped closer. Elena noticed that his tattoos weren't just ink, they were scars etched by time itself. The watch you fixed. It's not just a machine, it's the heart of Chronos. The man who gave it to you knew you had the gift. You see the ticking where others hear only silence. Julian revealed his secret. He had been a guardian for 300 years. To the world outside, he was dead, but here, he was eternal. However, if he were to step off Line 0 outside of its hour, his body would turn to dust in an instant. Elena felt a strange sadness. The man who had just saved her was a prisoner in a golden train, condemned to an endless journey beneath a city that had long since forgotten him. The train suddenly slowed, and the windows cleared. Elena gasped in wonder. She saw London, but not the gray, noisy one. She saw a city shrouded in purple mist, where the Thames glowed like a silver thread, and Big Ben struck colors instead of sounds. Over Hyde Park, beings of light soared, and in the alleys of Soho, the reflections of people who once lived there danced. "This is the true face of your world," Julian whispered. "Beautiful and fragile, and the shadows, the void, want to feed on it. They sense your light, Elena. You are like a beacon in a storm to them. We must hide you before Line 0 vanishes with the first ray of dawn." With a soft screech, the train stopped at a platform that looked like the entrance to an ancient cellar. "The Cafe of Stolen Moments," Julian announced, gesturing for her to follow. "They won't find us here. At least for now." Elena stepped out and smelled cinnamon, old paper, and fresh steam. She knew she couldn't go back to her clocks until she solved this mystery. The watch in her pocket ticked gently again, as if confirming that her adventure was only beginning. But time was running out. There were only 30 minutes left until 1 a.m. The Cafe of Stolen Moments was more than just a hideout. It was an archive of human lives. From floor to ceiling, the walls were lined with thousands of small glass jars, inside which colored light pulsed memories that people had lost or voluntarily surrendered for a moment of oblivion. Julian led Elena to a secluded cast-iron table. An old bartender with eyes that had seen centuries brought them 2 cups filled with a liquid that shimmered like melted stars. "Drink slowly," Julian warned. "Here, you don't pay with money, but with attention. Every sip allows you to glimpse what once was." Elena touched Julian's hand, and in that moment, the world around her dissolved. She was no longer underground, but in the London of 1720. She smelled the soot and heard the rattle of carriages. She saw a young Julian, a talented astronomer, who searched for stars where others saw only darkness. She saw him strike a deal with the first Guardians to save the woman he loved from a terminal illness. But the price was his own presence in time. He became a Guardian, a being outside the calendar, while the woman he did it for grew old and forgot him. The vision ended, and Elena snapped back to the cafe. Julian's gaze was full of the silent suffering he had carried for 300 years. "Why did you show me this?" Elena whispered. Julian lowered his head. "Because you are the first human in 3 centuries who touched me and didn't feel only the cold of the void. Your light. It wakes those memories up." Time stood still between them at the table, this time not by magic, but by the bond starting to form between them. Elena realized that Julian wasn't just a warrior, but a lonely time traveler, waiting for someone to fix not just a watch, but his broken fate. At that moment, however, the jars on the walls began to shake, and their light turned black. The void had found them. The peace of the cafe was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Shadows began to crawl through the cracks in the floor like black ink. Julian immediately drew his silver blade. "We have to go. If they consume your memories, you will cease to exist before the clock strikes 1. He grabbed Elena's hand, and they ran through the back exit into a labyrinth of steam pipes and gears that powered the invisible part of the city. Elena felt the pocket watch warming in her pocket. It began to vibrate in rhythm with her racing heart. Only 15 minutes remained of their time, and the path to the heart of Chronos, the only place that could save London, was still far away. They ran deeper than the foundations of Westminster, down where the subway's roar is replaced by a rhythmic, deafening thumping. The heart of Chronos. A vast chamber filled with gargantuan gears that rose high like a cathedral of brass and steel. Everything turned in perfect harmony, powered by the River Thames, which flowed above their heads like liquid silver. But at the center of it all, in the main shaft, was a rift. A black void spreading like a cancer, grinding the machinery to a halt. "There it is," Julian exhaled, drawing his sword. "If those wheels stop, the world above freezes forever." A figure began to form from the rift. It wasn't just a shadow. It was the Lord of the Void, a being born from forgotten seconds and a hatred for time that passes. He had no face, only a hollow mask reflecting Elena's terror. So much effort for one mortal and a scrap of metal, hissed a voice that sounded like the scraping of rust. Julian stood between him and Elena. His silver tattoos glowed so fiercely it burned, but his breath was heavy. The battle began. Julian blurred between the gears like a flash of light, his blade clashing against darkness that consumed everything it touched. But every strike cost Julian a piece of his life force. "Elena, the watch!" Julian cried out as the shadow threw him against a brass pipe. "You have to insert it into the central mechanism. Only your gift can restart the heart." Elena looked at the massive gears, which were coming to a grinding, painful halt. The pocket watch in her hand burned like a glowing coal. She had to climb across the moving arms of the machine, while Julian's silver flashes and black lashes of the void whistled around her. She felt time crumbling beneath her hands. When she reached the slot at the core of the machine, she realized the watch wasn't just a key, it was a missing piece that she herself had to wind with her will. The Void Lord saw her and sent a wave of darkness her way. But Julian recovered, throwing himself into the path, using all his remaining silver light as a shield. "Do it," he roared. Elena closed her eyes, slid the black watch into the slot, and with all her might, turned its crown backward against the flow of fate. A shockwave of golden light surged through the entire hall. With a massive jolt, the gears roared back to life, and the sound of the machinery merged into a triumphant chord. With an inhuman scream, the darkness exploded and dissolved into dust. But when the light faded, Elena saw Julian lying on the ground, his tattoos, the very things keeping him alive, nearly invisible. Time had run out. It was 5 minutes to 1 a.m. The golden glow of the heart of Chronos slowly faded into a warm ember. The hall was silent, save for the steady, healthy ticking of the machine. Elena knelt beside Julian. His hand was cold, and the silver threads on his skin were vanishing like morning mist. "You have to go, Elena," he whispered, a tear glinting in his silvery eyes. 2 minutes left. If you stay, you'll become part of Line Zero, a prisoner like me. Elena shook her head, gripping his hand tightly. "You're not a prisoner anymore, Julian. We fixed the machine. And I see something you don't. I see the space between the seconds." Elena remembered her father's words. Time is not a prison. It is a rhythm, and every rhythm can be changed. She reached back into the central mechanism where her black pocket watch still rested. She didn't try to pull it out. Instead, she connected it to a silver filament leading directly to Julian's heart. She used her gift, the light of Chronos, to create a synchronization. "If you cannot come with me, I will take a piece of your world into mine," she whispered. At that moment, the clock struck 1. But instead of Julian turning to dust, a swirl of white light enveloped them both. The midnight line departed, but they remained suspended in a void that was no longer terrifying, but peaceful. A second later, Elena opened her eyes. She was sitting on the floor of her workshop in Soho. Outside, rain drummed on the window, and London was moving again, cars honking, people rushing to work. It seemed it had all been a dream. But then she looked at her workbench. Her old grandfather clock had stopped exactly at 1 a.m. And in the corner of the workshop, in the shadows of the old cabinets, stood Julian. He looked more human. His tattoos no longer glowed, but they were there, hidden beneath his skin like a silent reminder. "You did it," he breathed. Elena realized what she had done. She had created an anchor in time. Whenever time stops in this workshop, Julian can step into her world. Their life became a dance between two worlds. By day, Elena continues to fix watches, listening to the heartbeat of the city. But when midnight arrives and time stops in the workshop, Julian steps out of the shadows. He is no longer a lonely guardian, and she is no longer just an ordinary clockmaker. Together, they ensure London stays safe and their cups still smell of cinnamon from the magical cafe. People passing by their alley sometimes feel a strange tingling, as if their watches lagged for a split second. They have no idea that at that very moment, two souls separated by centuries have found each other again in one eternal second. For true love, much like time, has no boundaries.